Hello guys, I think I'm live. Welcome to the video. My name is Will. This is actually going to be a stream. I hope the levels are okay. And I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping off screen before we jump straight into this. Let's see what I'm doing. I'm just off screen, just going to quickly share the link on my LinkedIn. That's done. Go with that tab, save resources. If for whatever reason, the stream cuts off, and I do apologize because for the past couple streams and some videos, I actually had a set of videos prepared to go through this slightly different flavor of the game series, the game development series, whereby in this particular entry, I'm focusing on a sort of a top-down RPG style, as you can see. It's a very bare-bones simple scene, but we're going to work on this, see what we can come up with. We have to kind of use our imaginations to see where we can go with this. Give you a little taste of what's to come, I suppose. You can move around the scene. You can navigate the scene up, down, left, right. Very simple stuff using C# in 2D. We're going to go through our little agenda here in this live stream. Not sure if we're going to go through everything in one sitting, but I have a few things to go through that I want to do to improve this scene. And yeah, I just had a lot of like audio glitches with the recording, and I'm pretty sure, I think, there might be some glitches even during the stream because I'm using a kind of an interesting setup, for lack of a better term. But that's okay. We're gonna go through this. It's gonna be a very chilled stream, as I like to do, and yeah. So feel free to follow through this tutorial. You might find it quite informative, if not educational or entertaining. If you do use C#, even in a Unity context, because we're going to be looking at C# scripting. So without much further ado, I want to kind of jump into this. So what you see right now is sort of the result of quite a few tutorials. I've gone through how to use Win2D to craft a simple scene. As you can see, we have the bunny, and the bunny rabbit is running around the scene. Obviously, we're going to kind of change this animation so he's not just sliding like, moon walking up and down, so to speak. But he's going to the left there. Very simple assets. He kind of locks into place here with parallax scrolling. As you can see, he's kind of panning through the scene, but at a certain point, he sort of locks in and it parallax scrolls. And we can work with these tools to kind of build on top of this to create like a 2D top-down experience. There is literally no limit in what we can do here. So, just gonna go back up. One thing to note is that the assets, the trees, are being drawn in front of the bunny. I want to also introduce a system whereby that's taken care of, so that if you're in front of the trees, the bunny's in front. If you're behind the trees, the bunny's behind. So that's something on the agenda. So as you can see, I'll just quickly show you guys as well. I had a whole video series going through all of this stuff prepared, but unfortunately there was just glitches with the editing phase, so I just decided to do it as a live stream because why not? I didn't want to kind of re-record the videos all again from scratch when I can kind of just go through it live, and it's fine because the majority of what I was going through is already things that I've explained in like previous videos. But anyway, because I was doing it from the beginning to the literally from scratch. But that's all well and good. So what I want to do next is we have a scene. This tutorial today assumes you may have been checking out some of the previous entries in the series so that you kind of have an understanding as to how we got to this step, because I'm not going to explain everything from the ground up in this particular entry. What I want to do is jump straight to a collision system, right? How a collision system works in the game and how we can implement this such that, let's say, for example, if we collide with the trees, you can't go any further even if you try to. So there's a number of ways we can do this. I'm kind of coding all this straight ahead with just the notes in front of me, but we should be good to go. Now, to understand how to implement a collision system, let's kind of understand what's going on in the first place. I have in my draw call, I have a little workflow here. So in the draw call, the main functions are to pass the controls, deal with the camera, draw all the backgrounds, draw the sprites on top, and draw the foregrounds on top. Maybe the sprites should be drawn in front of the foregrounds. That's why the trees were in front of the bunny. But then we're going to kind of take care of that when we kind of get to this sort of Z buffering functionality to kind of order our assets on the scene. But first things first, let's go with the collision system first. So if we're I'll kind of walk you through the parse controls functionality. Again, everything here is still kind of, should I say, it's coded such that it works, rather than optimized. So, performance is not at 100% probably, and the workflow, I did try to keep it as general purpose as possible to kind of help for building on top of the framework. It makes things a lot more easy, far easier when the framework sort of works in a general purpose and a modular manner, as you may have noticed from my previous entries, where I went into how we load the resources. It's as simple as, updating a list, updating an index or two, and then the rest is taken care of. You can just update hundreds of sprites as you need and call them from a fairly general purpose animation function that I wrote. Okay, so what we're going to do, we need to consider what part of this workflow deals with the translation, and we need to implement some kind of aspect that perhaps maybe a physics function here or something. I think that might be a good way to sort of abstract the idea we're trying to take care of here. Some kind of physics function to deal with collision systems. So if I go to the camera, now what's going on here is that if I'll just kind of generally explain what's happening in this if condition. If we hit a zone on the left hand side of the screen, that's defined by some bounding rects, some values pertaining to some bounding rects. So I think they're just double values for now. Well, yeah, because I saved it as a double value, I think. Yeah, so we have double values here. So we're basically checking if we hold the A button. So if we're going to the left, and if we hit this limit, which is kind of defined here, then we lock onto the parallaxing, else the parallaxing is released. And the same for the right hand side. If we're holding the D key, parallax, this Boolean flag indicates that parallax is true, and we return the functionality. Otherwise we release the parallaxing functionality. And then from there, I can go back. Oh, okay, that's not even a local function, that's fine. So I'm working with globals, I think that's why I did that. It makes sense. So I'm gonna go back to draw core. Then we go to start drawing things. So this takes into account the way we draw the world and the way we draw the player. Okay. So I'm going to go to draw backgrounds. And all this does for now, not much pertaining to the kind of getting confused now. Not much pertaining towards the world in terms of panning, like translation. This is more of like the rendering itself. That's what I'm doing here. Kind of experimenting with some stuff here. Not too sure if this stuff is even too valid, because right now all we're really doing is just translating the image itself. I was kind of trying to play around with something, so we're not going to focus too much on the kind of the matrix transform effects, which helps for the pseudo 3D. I was kind of looking into that at first, but for now I'm going to kind of keep it just flat top down with maybe a hint of pseudo 3D to kind of help with some effects that might be necessary. That might be quite fun. Okay, so I really want to look for the part that locks into the parallax scrolling things. So we have camera panning controls. I'll come back to that. So when we parse the controls, which is at the top actually, we are looking for inputs. So we have the W. Let's go for A and D for starters, because that's left and right. So we scroll to the left. We're looking for that parallax trick, that parallax indication here via the Boolean flag. And if parallax is false, so if we're not locking into parallaxing, then the player one rect bounds. So this pertains to the value of the rect struct that the player character graphic is bound within. We actually decrement or increment it depending on the direction we're going in. That's if parallaxing is indeed released. But one thing I wanted to make sure of is to kind of disambiguate the virtual position, so the kind of the world spacing of the character in a virtual realm, if that makes sense, compared to the physical location. I say physical, I use the term loosely, the actual rect positioning on the screen. Because one thing we have to take into account is that, let's say for example, I'm not sure if this is going to be a great example, but I'll go for it nonetheless. We're running across the screen, so right now in the back end, the rect struct is the x-axis of the rect struct is being incremented in real time. But then what happens when we lock into parallaxing? The struct itself is not actually moving in the back end. The rect struct is locked in place. But technically, in some form, the bunny is moving across the world plane, which is a virtual plane of the game itself. So we need to increment the virtual position of the bunny whilst keeping the actual rect struct values the same. Otherwise, we're going to run into troubles perhaps with our collision system. That's why I'm incrementing the rect struct value here. This is used for the rect struct when we construct the rect. But the virtual position, the kind of the imaginary position of the bunny rabbit, if I could say, is being incremented only when parallaxing. Only when, let me just make sure I'm doing this right. Yeah, this is being decremented regardless of I'm not sure if I'm doing this right actually, but I'm gonna just go through it still and we're gonna work on it, because right now the way this logic is going, this decrements, post decrements, regardless of the parallaxing being true or false, because we're not returning after this condition, so this is always executing. So that's correct if I'm not mistaken, because if one thing we have to understand is that regardless of what the visual is telling us, as long as we are hitting the A button to run to the left, we need to update where the bunny is going in virtual space, because we're telling the program run to the left only if the bunny has collided with like a wall and the bunny is literally not moving, even despite the fact we're holding the A button. Then we don't have to increment that. That's another level of validation we're going to need, which may be in this session, because we're going to be looking at adding the collision system. So I've put this system throughout all the W, A, S, and D, I think, or is it just the A and D I did it? I'm not too sure. Yeah, it's just A and D for the parallaxing, but the virtual position I am updating in all four axes, W, A, S, D. Let's see now. You know what, since we're here, let me sort out parallaxing in the Y plane, because I haven't done that yet. So just to show you guys what I mean, before we add the collision system, let's kind of round things off. So parallaxing works left and right in the x-axis, but I don't believe it's locked in up and down. Oh, it actually is. Okay, don't listen to me. Actually, wait. I don't think it is, because I'm not even translating the bunny. He's just staying still. It's just the world that's moving, if I'm not mistaken. That's why it seems to be parallaxing, but I didn't actually program it as such. So let's fix that, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just double check that. So let's say when I'm scrolling down, so when I'm pressing S, so I am indeed incrementing the virtual position. So as you can read there, I know it's a bit hard to it might be hard to see and stuff, so I'll zoom in a little bit. The virtual position is being post incremented, which is correct, but we need to make sure that we are incrementing this for the y-axis. So we need this parallax condition for the bunny as well. So let's create the parallaxing bounds first. So if I go here, what I'll create another parallax Boolean flag, but for the y position. I don't want to use the same flag for X and Y, that might introduce problems. Let's just say parallax Y axis. Oops, spelled that completely wrong. Assigned to false. Do excuse me. Let's see where we're validating that parallaxing. In the camera functionality. So checking for the X plane is here, but checking for the Y plane is going to be extremely similar. So we're going to need another set of if conditions, I believe, and it's going to be almost exactly the same. Like such. Let's see. Evaluate for parallaxing across the Y plane. And I'm going to change some of these values. So I think I already have these values for the Y plane. So player rect x-axis, let's change that to Y. I've already got it defined there. and I'm going to have to change the parallax limits. And this one will be for up, so I'm going to change it to W. So if we're moving up, key down is W. Let's see, do I have parallax Y limit defined? I've got X and X left, X right. So when you think about it, we have X on the left side here. So the parallax limit, if this is the screen, the viewport, and then we have a parallax limit on the right hand side as well, to, as I'm kind of trying to visualize that. So what we're going to do, I'm going to make some scroll limits, but for Y, for the Y plane. So I'm going to say parallax limit Y, and let's just estimate. Let's just say if Y is equal to, I don't know, is 100 a good one? Let's keep it as 80. Actually, I'm going to, depends where the bunny starts off. I don't want the bunny to start above it, but it doesn't really matter, I think. Anyway, we'll work through it. The parallax Y bottom, I'll just change the naming there. So towards the bottom of the screen. Let's make it something like 4. Let's keep it on 400 for now. And then I'll change this to Y top is 80. 100, 400, 80. Let's make it 480. I don't know. Why not? Actually, no. More like 380. And I'm being a little bit funny there, but it doesn't really matter. It's all good. Same thing. Alright, sweet. So I'll go back to the draw core. So if we're evaluating for going up, then we want to make sure that we are within the bounds. So we have to be greater than or equals to, I think, because the way it works is that as we go, as the Y value is incrementing, we're actually going down the screen. That's the way it works with Win2D and with this graphics system. And as we increment on the X plane, we actually increment to the right, if I'm not mistaken. So in that case, we want to make sure that we are within the bounds. So we want to, I don't know if I said it the first time, but we need to be, greater than or equals to before we lock onto the parallax. If I'm wrong, we'll just change the sign. Make sure I'm in the right place. Here we go. So Y-axis, change the sign here. If we're greater than or equals to, so if we breach the parallax Y limit at the top and we're holding the W key, then we lock onto the parallaxing. And I'll just change that to parallax Y, because we might be parallaxing at the top, but we might not be parallaxing on the X, so that's why we're using a different flag. Change the flags here as well. And then similarly, if at the bottom of the screen, if we are, I guess this one should be less than actually, because we're post-decrementing as we're going up. My fault. Messed up there. That's fine. So if we are post-incrementing, so i.e. if we're going down the screen and we breach the parallax, and I'm going to change that. Oops, shouldn't do that. Parallax bottom. Like this. And if the key down is S, and parallax Y-axis is true, otherwise we release the parallaxing. So now we need to just use our Boolean flags to help control the actual translation of the screen. It's going to be very similar to how we dealt with it on the X-plane. So if we look here, it's as simple as this, I think. So what I have here, I'm checking for parallax Y-axis. If parallax Y-axis is equal to false, then we so if we disengage parallax, then we are going to still increment the player movement. So the player about the X-axis is going to increment. What's the Y? I'm going to do the same for going down, so it should be S. I hope I'm doing this correctly. that pertains to the background itself. Layer one. So I want to see one more thing. I think we have to deal with the background. Let me see. Let me think about this. Oh yeah, I noticed something strange. I mean, it depends how you look at it. But when the parallax is disengaged, I just realized that the background still moves, and I mean, it doesn't. I feel like that does make a difference. I mean, why would, what would, I mean, parallax moving the player and parallax in the background effectively kind of, if I'm not mistaken, it might kind of affect the speed of the player because you're changing two parameters like this. But then as soon as the bunny's locked in, he's kind of moving a bit slower because now the bunny's not moving, but it's just the background. So what I'm trying to say is that when the parallax is disengaged, which I think I've kind of broken it. Oh no, there we go, it's working. When the don't worry about that. It should be just. It is gonna glitch a little bit because I'm not quite done yet. When the parallax is disengaged, I don't want the background to move because we're not parallax scrolling just yet. So I'm gonna deal with that. So we need to find where we're parallaxing the background, which I think might be in the camera functionality. I'm not too sure. Or it could be under draw backgrounds. Let me have a quick look. So the bounding rect is rect bounds. So I need to see where I'm affecting this rect bound x-axis value. So I'm going to go to all final references. I'm going to see where I'm making a post incrementation or decrementation. I can see two of them here. So it happens to be there. Ah, okay. It's just, it was literally in the place we were at before. I just couldn't see it at first. So regardless of parallaxing, rect bounds is always been affected. So we're going to change that. So we want this to only be affected when parallax is disengaged, which should be in this condition, I believe. So I can do like this. Make sure I'm doing that right. If parallaxing is false, player 1 rect y-axis. Yeah, because the player is moving, but the background shouldn't. So actually I'm doing that wrong. So player's moving, background is still. But this should still be under a level of validation. Now let's see if I'm doing this right. I'll put an else condition. So if the parallaxing is engaged, then only the background will kind of translate across the screen. I'm trying to avoid to use the word physically. Now obviously change the polarity accordingly. Just paste this in. So D and A pertain to left and right, so I'll change it to x-axis. DS is down, so that's Y, that's fine. A is left and right, left rather, so I'm going to change to X. And W is going up, so that's Y-axis. Awesome. So, I don't know, because I have to test it first, but I just saw something that caught my eye. Camera panning controls. Okay, so this is just this is for the yard pitch roll stuff. This is for the kind of subtle like Matrix 3D effects, but I'm not really concerned with this too much. In fact, I might even comment this out for now because it seems like I'm adding more post incrementation decrementations, and I'm not correctly validating this. So what I'll do for now, I'm going to comment this out. It might come in handy later. This was yesterday when I was working off screen, because I'm not really worrying about that so far. Let's see what happens. If I didn't break things too much in my program. We're not even up to the collision system yet, but we're getting there. We're getting there. I think it's just important to sort of like normalize the scene before we worry about collisions. So, don't think I did that correctly at all. In fact, the background's not moving when I'm parallaxing, so it seems like I got the conditions mixed up. I mean, that one is fine, so to speak. I need to be careful because the speed is different. But this, pressing D is not correct. Let's fix that. W, A, S, and D. Probably because of that. Okay, I see it. Rec bounds, rec bounds. Yeah, I forgot to get rid of that. So I need to make sure that, because I encapsulated this in the condition, I forgot to get rid of this. Get rid of this one as well. I suspect that I'm adding more speed than I should. Oh, it's because it was doubling up. That's why it was moving fast. Still not 100% sure this is correct. I still had some weird functionality. Well, let's have a look at what's going on. So the direction was not correct for the parallaxing or something like that. I'll see how it is. So again, when the bunny moves when we haven't engaged parallaxing, then I don't really want the background to move. I only want the background to scroll when parallaxing is engaged. Like this. Oh, I forgot about the trees. So yeah, that's fine. But obviously the direction is wrong on the right hand side. Oh, I must have forgot to change the sign. So now I've just kind of broken the scene. So let's see. Yeah, because I copied and pasted, that's why. So D should actually be, just as this is a post. Let's see, I'm moving to the right. Moving to the left. I think this one's right. I think it's this one that's not right. Because they're both the same sign. Where the player, when it's parallaxing, the background should go against the player. So if I'm moving to the left, really, oh sorry, no, I'm looking at the wrong place. This is moving down. So if the player is moving down, then if I'm parallaxing, effectively I should be going up. I don't even know, because that's already minusing. In any case, I think that shouldn't be the same. I think they need to go against each other. I'll see in a minute. So if I'm not engaged with parallaxing, the player moves, pressing W, player 1 rect Y, post decrement, so he's going up. Otherwise, the background starts to translate, and it should translate down, I think, like this. So I think they should be against each other. So as that's minus, this should be plus. Hopefully I might be wrong actually, but I'm thinking that's the case. Minus plus. All while updating the virtual value of the player. Plus minus. Give this a whirl, see what happens. And then if the background is all well and good, then I just have to deal with the tree assets. Now we can kind of abstract this all in one, like a particular functionality maybe, which will definitely help because I mean I know the workflow, so it's not too difficult for me, but it's like I have to jump around to deal with the whole entirety of the scene, but we're working with what we got so far. So right now, I understand the trees are moving because I haven't yet programmed them to deal with the parallax. But I'm going to run to the right, the background, the green grass, it shouldn't move as such until I hit the parallax zone around here. But the only thing is that it's just going the wrong way. That's fine, I'll just change the sign. Same for this, which was going to go. Yeah, that's fine, almost there. So what I'll do, for A and D, I suspect as well for up and down. It's a bit hard to visualize the solution sometimes in my mind, but that's why it's good to test things out. this. I guess the signs are the same. I was incorrect. I'm just gonna trust this. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Now once I can verify the background is agreeing with me, then I can deal with the foreground assets, which I should be dealing with the parallaxing in the draw foregrounds if I'm not mistaken. Just a second there. Maybe I'll just expand this. Okay, so the background is not moving. So it would seem, even though it's a really bad effect, it would seem that the bunny's traversing the screen, even though it doesn't really, the scene isn't really solved in my opinion. But that's another thing. And now the bunny seems to be moving across, and same with the right hand side. Just like that, makes more sense. Now I need to fix this because the parallaxing is incorrect here. But for up and down, we'll see what we can do. Firstly, I want to change the value. So limit at the top, I want it to be like 0, and the bottom I'm gonna expand it to like 480. So right at the top, or maybe I'll make it like, maybe not straight at the top, like 40, close to the top. Now we'll go back to the draw call. I'll just collapse the draw foreground so I can see better. Okay, so I'm gonna run this. I'm gonna check my camera core again. And I just have to, if it's not correct, I have to just kind of evaluate what's going on here. It could be the signs are incorrect. We're moving up. So for starters, the bunny's moving up because the background's staying the same. Everything's going up. But as I go up, everything is parallaxing, which is interesting. So let's deal with down first. So what I need to happen, just as the left and right was working, the up and down needs to work. So I'm going to focus on S first. Parallax limit Y bottom, make sure I'm using the right values there. Starts off at 0. Make sure I'm incrementing that in the right direction. So that increments all the way up to the limit of 400. Once I breach it, once I'm at the same or above, then I invoke parallaxing. So that seems correct. You know what, that's wrong. I forgot to change this. It should be parallax y-axis and it's not. That alone can break things. That should all be parallax y-axis and that should all be parallax. Of course with the x-axis. Overlooked something there. Let's have a look. So my Win2D session is, or rather my UWP session is just loading. Alright, so I'm going to move across the screen. Okay, just invert parallax a little bit. Such. Still kind of broken, which is fine. I'm guessing I'm invoking parallax in here because I'm probably at beyond the breach already. Technically that might be correct, but then going down again is a bit weird. I think the only issue is that I'm not translating the bunny. but the background's not parallaxing. But of course, we're just ignoring the trees for now because we haven't dealt with them. It's a little confusing. So I'm gonna make sure where I'm translating the bunny, I want to make sure he's going down. That would be under, I think, draw sprites or animate sprites. It could be to do with the parallaxing as well. Let me just have a quick look. Ah, I see. Oh, that's fascinating. Okay, so this is just for the animations. Okay, that's how I did it. Not to do with the movements themselves. You know what's funny? I'm going to I'm going to change the animations. So when I'm running down and up, I want to make I don't want him to be just in a standing position. I don't have running up and down animations per se, but I'm gonna just use this. I think this will just help so that it just looks like he's running, even though it's gonna look a little bit weird. Okay, good thing I made a pit stop there. Just make sure everything, step by step, I'm gonna make sure everything is updating. And it's a chilled kind of walkthrough. Of course, we may or may not go through all the steps. As we see, there's a lot to prerequisite before we even go to the collision system. But I really do want to get this bit working. So now he's got the running animation going up and down, which is fine. Okay, so let's deal with the actual translation, which I believe is in parse controls, maybe. So let's have a look at what's going on. So we are concerned really with player 1 y-axis. And so when we're pressing S, player 1 and the y-axis is being post-decremented. Okay, so I think that has to actually be post-incrementation, because I don't know. I hope I'm not. Well, if I'm wrong, it will show. But post-incrementing should be a downwards movement, if I'm not mistaken. If I'm not mistaken. Otherwise, rep bounds goes up. I'm gonna try this one step at a time. So the parallax is false. If we're not engaged in parallax, then the player 1 rect should be coming down. So as far as my understanding goes right now, I might be wrong. Let's see. Yeah, just as I thought. Haven't engaged in any sort of parallaxing yet, which is interesting. Okay, at least I've fixed the movement bit, and there's a parallax zone being invoked at the top, which is great. Now I have to just make sure my parallax zone, I take it that 480 is a bit too high, but as you can see, now things are moving. The parallax zone is just a bit off screen, and I'm parallaxing the wrong way. So that has to, just as I have to make that post increment above, I want to post increment that should be fine. And then I'm going to just lower the limit here, it's a bit too high. The height is not quite with the same dimension of the width. So let's just say like 200. Let's keep it quite small if we can. And I'll test that, and then I'll deal with the trees, which is the rest of the scene. Because the more assets we have on the scene, the more we have to do. So I'm thinking at some point we need to really generalize what the scene is. We have to really encapsulate what the scene is, such that if we make, there's two ways to look at it. We can make macro changes to the scene. So as I'm sort of, and I'm just kind of naming this myself off the top of my head, as we're doing things like changing the translation values and the way the scene moves, that's all kind of what I consider macro. But if I have to do stuff like changing a particular asset, that's obviously like more of a micro style change. So I think it's quite good to identify that in code, like what those changes are. Right now I'm using the micro way of affecting the macro, which is why it's taken a bit of time. But if I can abstract and kind of encapsulate all of the scene into like one grouping, then it might be possible to sort of macro affect everything with minimal input. So that looks quite good like that. Obviously I need to deal with the trees properly. But as far as translation goes, the bunny is parallaxing correctly against the background for now. So you can see, obviously the quality of the sprites is questionable, but that's another story. So I'm going to deal with the trees now, just to kind of bring the scene together. So here, as you can see, the trees are not really encapsulated in any sort of validation. That's why they're just moving so freely. So in as much as I'm parallaxing the character over here, I think. Well, I guess the trees sort of, when you think about it, they're kind of are like a background in themselves. So I'm going to encapsulate the parallaxing with the trees as I'm parallaxing the background. So I'll take that and move it here. Excuse me, and I'll do the same for the other parts. Like this. Place it in the validation, and I think there's one more. Got my tree, fruit tree, and moss tree X values. And you know what? I should really be dealing with the y-axis as well. So where are the tree values? X, Y, X, Y, X, Y. Oh, I've got them already, so X, X. Okay, I should have Y as well. So I'll go back to the top, and I'll make sure I'm constructing the trees. I'm constructing them with the same values, so X, oh, I did do it right, didn't I think. Just make sure I'm doing this right. Yeah, it's already done. Sorry guys, I misread my own code. So Y, tree X, tree Y, and tree X. That's fine. Let's have a look at what's going on. And if this is all well and good, check it now, then we can finally move on to collisions. Probably have a function in the draw class, just to keep things simple, rather than having a physics class in itself. I missed something out. I'm not sure how I did that. Or when I copied and pasted. Let's try that. Oh, I knew there was an error somewhere. I have to wait for this to break. I don't think there should be two semicolons like that. It might still parse, but I don't like that. I'll wait. Yeah, it still passes. It's kind of funny. Compiles. It's a bit misleading though. Anyway, let's see what's going on. So the trees aren't moving with the background. Hopefully until I hit the parallax zone. As you can see, trees are still. So everything looks quite uniform, as you can see. We're getting somewhere. Let's test for the up position now. Yeah, it looks quite nice, doesn't it? Considering just what we've done so far, generally speaking. Kind of see where this is going. Get rid of that semicolon there. Collisions. So what I'm gonna do, it's you know, like just how we're evaluating for the parallaxing, we're evaluating two sets of values. Is exactly the same thing, but we're gonna kind of reverse the effect in some sort of way. So instead of kind of doing it for movement, it's gonna kind of halt the movement. If that makes sense. So I'm just gonna take a minute to think about where I want to place this functionality. I'm thinking of integrating it into the camera class. Sorry, the camera function. Because the camera and the kind of, you know, movement of the world and translation is kind of tied together. Kind of can't separate them 100%. Okay, let's keep things modular. So I'm going to do a separate function. Collisions. fairly similar. Only thing we have to really change is what we're evaluating for. Thinking of a way to make this general purpose. Interesting. Yeah, I think that's gonna. Yeah, I got an idea here. So, guys, what we can do. Again, this might not be the most optimal solution. Let's say, for example, okay, so let's identify what are we looking at when we translate an asset on the screen and act like, the rabbit or the trees. We're looking at these double values in this world coordinate class. Okay? They're pretty much doubles and some of these are floats for whatever reason. So I'm going to pass as in the signature of this function, I'm going to pass this parameter. This argument is going to be the x-axis. I'm going to say double y-axis. Let's say I'm going to write actor, x-axis, actor, y-axis, and I'm going to put the player bounds as well. Double player bounds x, and then double value player bounds y. So if we evaluate the x and y values of the player against any like an asset on the screen, we can then release a flag that says, collision detected, something like that. So if I take this, such, I just update the values. So this is for movement to the left. It's not a world coordinate, so I get rid of that qualifier. The class, the world class. So if the player bounds to the x that has been passed has basically collided, a less than or equals to, yeah. So if collision, so because the virtual key is the A, so we're moving to the left. If the player bounds in the x plane has collided with, say, the actor's x position, and we're moving to the left, then we need to say something like collision is equal to true. And I'm going to make that, let's say collision detected. But one thing we have to understand is that depending on the complexity of the game, right now this is only really checking for one instance of the collision, which is going to be for the player and the world. As soon as we start dealing with like different NPCs and stuff, we might need different instances of collision detection, such that we're not, kind of clashing this Boolean flag. So this is just a very naive kind of approach right now, but it should hopefully work for what we need. So let's have another flag here. Initially set this to false. Back. Otherwise, collision is false. I'll do this very carefully. And this format can just be literally replicated. So let's see. So I'll write something like check collisions when moving towards the left. And the same, but then we're going to just change the variables for the right hand side. So for starters, the key pressed pertaining to the right is S. Yeah, that's the only difference, and we have to change the sign as well. And then up and down is quite similar. Let's go, we're moving upwards. So there's going to be the W button. I'm going to change that to actor Y axis. And I think I need to change the sign to less than or equals. So that. I'm going to make a new parameter for this. Or do I need to? I guess you can only really collide with something on one side at a time. You know, if you're colliding on the right hand side of a rock, then you're not going to be colliding at the bottom at the same time, really. So I will just leave the flag as is. Won't make another one. And I'll just adjust the variables for down collision detection. Such. So Y bounds, change the sign. Downwards if greater than or equals, and I'm going to change that to, I think, the S I need. So this one shouldn't be S actually. This to the right should be D. So A, D, W, S, that's correct. So now we just need to evaluate for this collision detection variable, now that it's being controlled via validation. If I go to the draw call, and then we're going to call the function as well. Alright, so where's the draw call? Here we go. Camera movement. I think it is. Is it camera or is it something else? I don't remember. Pass controls, I think it is. So here we're dealing with the parallax movement and the standard movement when we're not parallaxing, whilst also affecting the well positioning. So what I'm going to do is add a layer of validation to encapsulate all of this logic. So if collision detected is false, such. So if there is no collision detected, then we just do things as standard. But if there is a collision detected, then we're not going to move at all. So all this is effectively nullified. Such. Parallax. So I've got this above the parallax. Condition. Else. Yeah. Now, how do we assign the values themselves? Well, that's where the calling comes in. So what we're going to do yeah, so we're going to have to check for the collision at every call. This kind of tapers off into performance a little bit because we have so many calls going on in one step. Obviously we start to think about optimizations and things, but that's another thing. Anyway, in as much as we're parsing controls, I'm just trying to think how we're doing this. Those collisions. Let's make sure we are parsing the collisions before we pass the controls, because we might have updates to the state, I guess. Let's fill the overloads. So the player bounds, world coordinates, should be like player 1 rect x-axis, and the y-axis. Now the funny thing is that we need to put in all the values of the actors themselves one by one. But then if we had, say, if we put all the actors on the scene, including all the assets on the screen in a list, we can just use a simple loop for this. But for now, we're gonna have to hard code it because we don't have that functionality. All it is just a few trees. So so for each tree, put the x and the y values. And again, once we start looking at optimizing things, I think there's 3 trees to check for collisions, I think. Then kind of makes things a bit better. Let's go for the moss tree. And then I think it's the fruit tree. Okay, so we're going to test all of this. Not too sure what the screen resolution is actually. I was playing around with that earlier off screen, so I'm just hoping that things are readable. I was assuming I was at maximum res, but I don't think I am. Just in case, I really hope it's been readable up till now. Sorry guys if it hasn't been. Approaching the 1 hour mark. One thing I just realized is that what happens. Okay, let's just see what's going on exactly. So what's going on? I thought that would happen. So we're checking collisions against the Y plane, as you can see. The bunny has locked in place, but he's not exactly next to the tree. My worry, let me just double check this, I might be overthinking this. Yeah, so this is what I thought. The issue we're running into here is that I'm checking for, seeing if there's a good way to visualize this. In as much as I'm checking for, if you imagine an imaginary line like this, pertaining to the X plane, because the X value is around here. So once we hit this part here, we are invoking the collision detection. But we need to make sure, in as much as we're doing for this object's x-axis, we're also scoping for the y as well, so that we're not invoking collision everywhere across the y plane pertaining to that x position. And I think that's why we're having some issues here. So I'm going to go back to my collision detection functionality. So all it means, I think, we might just have to combine some of these valuations. So if we collide across the x-axis, excuse me, and because these are all relative values being passed, what I could do, and because we're returning after this, that's why we're having issues, what we're going to just simply do, I think it might be a way to work around this. We need to detect for up and down, like the y-axis kind of thing, in this, within scope of this check before we return the function. So when moving towards the right, so when moving up, so I'm going to get this condition. Let's hope this is correct. So this is collision across the y bounds. So effectively we're kind of making the collision detection like a box, like a little box, well, really binding it like this, rather than a line going across, if that kind of makes sense. I know it's a bit hard to visualize like that. My poor analogies there. So I'm saying if collision is detected across the x-plane, but within the same bounds of this asset, the tree actor, we are also, colliding on the y-axis as well, and we are also going in a particular direction, pressing A, and then is collision detected. That's that. Gonna do the same for the right hand side. And I might not even have neither. It might even be unreachable code if the pre-compiler picks it up. I'm not too sure. Which is good because it means we can just delete what's at the bottom. It might not be unreachable. It's still gonna evaluate, I guess, but it would be kind of redundant because we are evaluating for the y plane already here and here as well. Doing the same here, reversing the kind of evaluation, it doesn't really make sense. Sort of doing the same thing, I guess. So I'm going to comment out this. I might be wrong. We're going to test this out. Give this a whirl. Let's see what happens. Hopefully we collide with just where the trees are. Like, so if we have kind of confined the collision to like a box, effectively a collision box, then we should be okay, hopefully. Otherwise, maybe some further debugging might be necessary. Start by trying to move down. Okay, no collisions as of yet. Let's try and hit this tree here. Okay, it just went through it. Let's try this way. No, let's try and be a bit more accurate if possible. Okay, mine's just going through. Let's try this. Okay, so we seem to have some collisions here, as you can see. It's still broken because I'm trying to move to the right and nothing's happening. But we can pass underneath for some reason. But we can't. So the collision seems, now I'm locked in place. So the collision system is a little broken. I say little broken. Let's try and go. Okay, so let's try from this side. Okay, I think I know what's going on. So I'm only, okay, the reason for this, for starters, one thing I've detected is that we are only checking for one position, which is the X, excuse me, it is the top left of the graphic, the bounding graphic, which is here. That's where the world coordinate is picking up for these assets, but we need to get the bound, so we need the width and the height as well. We're going to pass that through. It doesn't really explain why this is happening. I think my my preconditions might be wrong, actually. I'm going to have to double check that one. I think it's something to do with the signs, because I just kind of made an assumption. Excuse me, let me see this. I probably have to, yeah, I think I have an idea. Probably need an extra layer. So moving towards the left, player bounds Y. I have a theory here. The issue we're running into, I'm going to use a notepad to try and visualize this. If we're checking, let's say we have two objects, rabbit and the tree. Okay? Right now, as it is, we are checking if the rabbit goes towards the tree, like this, there will be a collision detection once the rabbit exceeds this bounds, which is if greater than or equals to tree value, like this, then collision, like that. But since we're trying to create effectively a box, what we need to do is also account for the dimensions of the tree. So we need to account for the width of the tree. Let's just say W. Like this. So about the width of the tree, and also the height of the tree as well. But then I think what's going on is that we need to also account for the fact that we need more precise collision values. This scope of checking for collision is too great, such that we have an infinite bound before we check for collision. I don't know if that's exactly correct, but one workaround could be to check the exact values of where the bunny is pertaining to this collision box, rather than using greater than or equals to. Or we can just lessen the bounds such that it's a slight range, slightly within the range of the tree, just to account for any overshooting. The only thing with this is that we have to make sure we're going in, say, even increments, so that we can keep track of where the bunny is in a predictable manner. So I'm going to try and make sure all my values are even numbers, so they go into each other. And I can't overshoot the value itself. Should be fun. So the first thing I'm going to do is remove this, just in case I'm wrong. It's greater than, less than, equals, so I remember where I am. Like this. I'm going to check for the exact values. So, but then again, it may not make much of a difference, because the true issue I think I'm going into, notwithstanding the lack of the box detection, is that when I'm locked in, how do I get out? How do I disengage collision? That's the thing. And in my mind, I don't know if this is actually a solution, but what would happen if we check for collisions after we pass the movement? So technically, we always translate the player before we check for collision. That could be a workaround, because what we're basically saying is rabbit has collided with the tree. Then we check for collision. Yes, that verifies. But then in order to lock out, we need to move the rabbit away from the tree, then check for collision, and collision is returned false. But if we're always checking for collision before we move the rabbit, even attempt to move the rabbit, then this will just lock in. I think that's what's going on. So it might, I say emphasis on might, be a simple case of just moving this underneath where we're passing the controls. Let's see what happens. So this will be very fascinating. Have a look. And then, if my suspicions are correct, then it means it allows us to kind of move on to making that little hitbox rather than just like a dot. And that just means checking for the height and width, so that we can actually, collide around the tree rather than just in one particular point. It's probably why the collision was a little bit hit and miss as well. Let me zoom out a little bit. Formatting is going everywhere. I'm going to try and move forward. Collision. I'm still locked into place, which is really bad. For some reason, I don't know why, I'm not too sure why I can move around from there. but I'm always locked in here. Let's try and get out of here. Check for this tree as well. I think I know what's going on. I think I've only passed for this set of values and not for this tree's set of values. Hence why we're getting collision only against this fruit tree. It's funny that we can release from the bottom and not the top. So for now, I'll test against this fruit tree I believe I'm colliding with. And then once I can verify everything's working, then I can move on to the other trees as well. I think that's what's going on. So we have a couple issues. We have the fact that the collision is not detecting properly across the Y plane at the top. I should really be in debug mode, to be honest. And I think it's due to my conditioning is just incorrect. So what I'll do, I'll stop the program. I'll run it in debug mode and I'll set some breaks just to kind of verify where the issue is lying so we know where to edit the code. So where we would expect collision to not be detected seems to be locked in. So let's put a break. Yeah, moving to the right. That's what we're trying to break free from. We'll press D. And it does seem that collision is being detected. So let's have a look at our bounds. I'm gonna put this on the watch list. Easy for me to track. Player bounds, can I just delete that? These are for another thing. Player bound X axis of the tree. That's fascinating. I wonder if that's correct. Because I wouldn't expect that tree to be... What tree am I checking collision for? It would be a closer difference there. 80 and 244, completely different size of the screen. That worries me. What is 80 pertaining towards? Let's have a quick look at this here. Tree x-axis. Right. Maybe I'm using the wrong values here. So we have the fruit tree. We have the fruit tree, moss tree, and the normal tree. I take it that's the fruit tree, that's the moss tree, this is the normal tree, this is 80. Very fascinating. Unless I'm passing the wrong values here for the tree, so maybe this is the tree and I labeled it wrong or something, I'm not too sure. How I imported it might be a mistake there. Let's see what happens when we do break free from the collision detection underneath the tree. I'll go here, continue. Okay. I'm thinking of returning every time I hit false. I don't know if that kind of might be breaking things if I don't. test this bit out. So I'm checking for collision underneath the tree, see what happens. Collision is detected, but I am not colliding with anything, it seems. This is 268, so the player has moved. Yeah, I think my values I'm inputting are quite incorrect. X-axis, actor X-axis, the tree apparently is 80, could be any of the trees. Check the Y bound just to be safe. 272. Let's check this one as well. 188. Again, quite far off each other. $80 against 268. 188 against 270. I wouldn't expect to be that far off. Doesn't seem correct there at all. Right. I want to first make sure I'm passing the correct values, otherwise this is all of this doesn't make sense. So I'll check collisions. So the player one x-axis, x and y, tree, x and y, moss, x and y, fruit tree, x and y. This is an issue right now. I really seem to be evaluating for this one as well, which is kind of funny. I didn't notice the other values, but okay, got to that. What tree is that pertaining towards? I need to see where I'm drawing that. So if I go to draw foregrounds, I think. Draw trees. So it's the last tree that's in the list, I think. If I'm not mistaken, let me double check that. So this tree, Y and X, the one we're looking at that was 80 for the X-axis, pertains towards this rect 3. And for rect 3, we're looking at the sprite sheet at index at 6. So if I go, I want to see where I'm populating the sprite sheet, index at 6. Now we probably won't see the actual file path data, so I'm going to go to the load animated resources because it's kind of mirroring each other, and I'm going to go to see where I'm populating the file paths, and I'm going to look at the file path list because it's an exact mirror per se of the actual bitmap list. So this is what we're going to check. So at index at 6, we should hopefully see that tree graphic, the correct one. If not, I know that I made a mistake there. It's just confusing for the visual. Interesting stuff. If I check the file path, there's 7 entries. If we look at number 6, it is tree 0. So let's go into our directory. Look for tree 0. Ah, yes, so it is the normal tree. This one here, tree 0. So we're going to look out for this graphic. The one without the moss, the one without the fruits. Just the tree 0. Good to know. Let's just be sure of that. Okay, so it should be this tree here, because that's the graphic that's showing up. But the collision is really fascinating because even though the rect is here, now here's where I'm getting a bit worried. I'm not evaluating for the rect values. I'm evaluating for these so-called world values of the tree, which, as I've identified, is somewhat disambiguated from, I think is the right term. It's not. It doesn't pertain to the actual rect position of the trees themselves. Is that what we want? Don't we want to evaluate for where the tree is via its rect values rather than its virtual value? So this might be an issue where I can just pass the rect value x positions rather than these world virtual, what seems to be the virtual positions of the trees. Let's give that a shot. That might be why we're having these kind of discrepancies between the visual and the values. So I'm going to go back to these collision cores. Instead of passing this the world coordinate versions, let's pass let's directly pass the rects. So there should be tree rects somewhere. There's tree rect 1, 2, and 3. So it should be the x. This should be the normal tree, if I'm not mistaken. Let's pass its x value. And then we do the same for the y. And we're going to have to update the values as well, which we can't do directly. We have to reconstruct the rect, which is what we're doing, but we have to make sure we pass a buffer. I don't want to mess with this. So, that's so weird. Okay, so mosh tree. Which one's the mosh tree? What rect is the mosh tree? Is the mosh tree pertaining to? Mosh tree, tree rect 2. That's the one we want. Where's the collision cause? I can't find it. So we'll go with this. Get rid of world coordinates. One dot x. I like putting the disqualifier. And we have tree rect y. Not sure what happened there. Okay, so we're passing the rects, the values of the rects themselves, regardless of, so basically wherever the rects are on the screen, parallaxing or not, that's where we want to evaluate, which makes more sense. See if there's anything else I missed out. So let's do this step by step. But then now, so we're evaluating collisions based on what we've provided. Yeah, I might check this out now, see what's going on, so I know what to do next. Okay, I have my little scene here. Still move up and down. Let's try and collide with this tree. Well, let me try and go past it first. Okay, I'm locked in, which is interesting. Let's see why this is happening. I'm not sure why this is happening. Probably because I'm using a greater than, a less than or equals to evaluation. Without being too specific, it's rather a broad evaluation. I think that's why we're having this issue. And again, it's still not very accurate. Still extremely hit and miss. Like, what is going on here? Now, because I'm evaluating collisions for all the trees, it could be that I'm colliding. I collided with this tree's values here, just now. Now I'm colliding with this tree. If I kind of squeeze in, I'm locked in now again. So maybe I'm colliding with the third tree. I should really space them out, and now I can move. Again, it's not very accurate, but I can escape. Now we want to kind of work on the accuracy. Let's try and do this. See what happens. I could even like shade the wrecks maybe, just so I can see where the hitboxes actually are. That might be a good idea. That will give us a little bit more debug information. Consider that. Trying to see how to do this. So I think it will help if I have some debugging on the screen to kind of help me see what I'm actually colliding with and where. So now I'm passing rect values. But how can I tell the drawing core to draw the right rect? That's what I'm just thinking of. Oh, well, there's a simple way I can do it. Use if conditions, please. Let me see if I have an idea in mind. If I return the rect in question, again, this is not optimal. So if I return the rect in question, I change this functionality to return a rect. So I'm returning the rect. That way we know what rect is causing all of this, causing the collisions if we want to. Now I'm going to go back to the draw core. Obviously I'm going to fix my cores. I'm going to pass tree rect 3. I'm going to pass tree rect 2. And finally I'm going to pass tree rect 1. Now what I want to do, now that we're returning the rect in question, I mean, it's a case of where the place where I'm drawing the rect, I could use the returning rect. So where I'm drawing the foreground, I think it is, for the trees. So trees equals new rect. But I don't necessarily want to mess with this. But then I can still do a check. Now, this is going to be very funny. Because what I could do is say check for returned collided tree and indicate. I have to get the door. 1 second, guys. And I'm back. I did say it would be a chill stream. There we go. Considering, because we're passing the rect here and we're returning a rect, why don't we just pass the collision function which returns the rect anyway, like this. Wait, but then the only issue is that I actually want to indicate, so to make the indication, I want an if condition. I mean, like, off the top of my head, if we're returning a rect, or we could say like if not no, yeah, I got an idea. So we only return the rect when collisions are detected. Otherwise, let's return null. Okay, so rect is a non-nullable value type, okay. That's interesting stuff. Well, let's make a sort of a degenerate rect such that its value is 0. And we can check for the variable, knowing if this is the degenerate rect that we are evaluating. So as long as any rect of the asset actors any of their parameters don't equate to any of these variables respectively, we know we're not evaluating a degenerate rect because we can't nullify it for some reason. So this is just debug stuff. Say that the x value is not equal to 0. So if we're not evaluating the degenerate rect, and we only get the degenerate rect when we don't collide with any of the trees, but when we do collide with the tree, in this case we know it's tree rect 1. So I'm thinking of kind of altering something on the screen. I could just have like a pop-up that says, you know, tree rect 1, or I could color it in. I'm thinking of coloring it in, that's why I'm thinking so much. I'd have to draw another e.drawing session or something, that's a bit long. Let's have a bit of XAML, I guess. Perhaps, as long as we don't get issues with the draw cause. Do apologize for the silence, guys. I'm just trying to focus a little bit while I just make this, and then I can just explain what's going on. Not too sure if this is going to work. This is why I've heard of this rule of thumb of kind of like debugging or creating debugging tooling or functionality as you program your game in any kind of game project, you know. And I guess we're approaching that threshold where we do need to kind of consider debug tooling because things get more complex. Don't know if anything's going to change on screen. Now, isn't that amazing? Like, I'm so sorry for overreaction, but look at that. I mean, now we know what tree is causing the collision. It's this tree here. See that? Isn't that's sick? I'm so sorry, but that's I like that. This is worth the time. So for some weird reason we're causing collision with this tree, even though we're way outside of its bounds. We need to investigate this. What I'm gonna do is add the debugging for the other trees as well. So I'm gonna adjust that to tree rep 2, and then the same for tree rep 3. How are we doing for time? About 20 minutes to 2 hours. Tree rep 2, and then tree rep 3. Alright, so let's have a quick look at this. Just so we know if we're colliding with any other trees as well. It really does help. Now it's like I heard the rule of thumb about the debugging stuff, but now I've experienced it, so it has registered in my mind. Like it's a different situation. It's very interesting. It really does make a huge difference instead of me just kind of blindly guessing. Let me see if anything happens here. So that tree is being collided with. As we can see, it's still, for some reason I'm still triggering collision because the box is there. Let's see if I can maximize this. See now I'm locked in somewhat. I wonder if that tree at the end is being collided with, and it just means that I have to deal with the collisions. Might be in another video because I'm approaching 2 hours. I do appreciate the length of time. I do like to respect the time quite a bit to some degree. I'm still colliding with this tree here. It seems the hitbox is like all the way out. I mean, there are 2 collisions at once, which is really not great. So yeah, the collision system is really broken. Might take some time to deal with the solution off screen so that by the next entry of this video series, I'll have the clean solution for you guys. But so far, we've made quite a fair bit of progress. You know, we've sort of dealt with parallaxing, and we've introduced a little bit of debugging. I think that's quite fun. So, kind of respecting the time a little bit. It's been like 1 hour 40 minutes, guys. Thank you for tuning into the stream. If you watched it live, it will be on the channel as a recording. It should be at least. I do offer freelance services. If you are interested, this is a bit of a shameless plug. Don't know if I can get my profile up really quickly. I am running 2 screens. It wasn't that one. But yeah, if you're interested in some of the, I'm thinking of making some of the source material of my projects just available via Bitbucket like I used to do. So do look out for links and do let me know, because it's so much more, like, it's easier for me to know if you guys are interested in some of the source code. You know, I'm quite happy to put some of this stuff out just there available, open source. Here's my profile if you're interested. I'm running some of my services, you know, on Upwork if you want. Otherwise, do check out my website, because on my website is where I like to dump a lot of source code, like I used to do on my old website. But my old website, LDN Studio, IG is offline right now, for the most part. So I'm just using this one here, Teddy-Jimoh Studios again. And I'll probably have another section here for like code and stuff. Thinking of putting it on the website directly. So yeah, guys, thanks so much for sticking around. I do appreciate it. Had a lot of fun with this particular stream entry, and we're going to be carrying on with this series. I think this top down is quite fun. Thanks again for watching, guys, and have a great day and a great week. I do have some comments, so let's have a quick look. I'm really sorry. I'm only seeing this now. I'm only looking at the comments now, so I'm going to go through it. Let's look at it live. I'm so sorry if the guys watching now. I didn't actually look at the comments while I wasn't putting it up on the screen on the side, so I wasn't really interacting. But next time I'll make sure I'm looking at the comments while I'm doing this. So let's go through it because I think it's quite interesting. If I can just connect, hopefully my laptop doesn't just explode on me. I think I had a little bit of a suggestion here, some nice constructive suggestions about how to go about this. Alright, so what have we got here? Oh, just yeah, here we go. So I assume as I have hitboxes square 1 and 2, I probably must check all the potential corners. Yeah, a pair of chords. So that's exactly what I was considering. So kind of having like a hitbox, as opposed to just a single point. Just as this person has very correctly said. I should do something like move left and right one square, touching another. Just move the rabbit in the opposite direction or put him near the tree. I can operate objects as points, even just as getting into the right tree is difficult. Try to pass the side. Exactly. So this is what I was somewhat alluding to. Having the width and the height, aka the size of the tree, will then allude to the bounding square of the tree itself. And I should use lists. And I agree with you. I'm going to do this for the next entry. So what I'm going to do, I'll make a note of this in the agenda so I don't forget this. But I'm going to use lists to iterate through all of the objects. It will, as this guy said, make my life a lot easier. Let's put that down here. So under collision, for next time, implement a list to iterate through scene actors easily. Thanks very much, Cyron. I'm going to take that into account for the next entry. Thanks very much. Adi, thank you. Awesome. Guys, thank you very much for watching the stream. If you've been tuning in, my name is Will, and I really appreciate the views, you guys watching, interacting and stuff. It really does motivate me to make more of these videos. So, I bid you all a great day. Let me just make sure if I'm on the right screen. I have to take this off, so might as well. I bid you all a great day, and just enjoy your week as well. Stay safe, alright? Bye-bye.